Homeostasis is crucial to having us be able to eat appropriately in the environment that we are in. Human beings have basically lived in many environments all over the earth and managed to thrive in them, from the hot desert to the frozen Arctic. And they have found ways by using their brain of getting the first thing that we need to understand about why we're getting fat is that getting fat is the most important evolutionary change that accompanied the big brain. Now, that doesn't make sense to people, but it's crucial to understand this. Our brain, they need from that environment in order to satisfy their body's needs for nourishment and fuel, is only about 2% of our body weight, but it is always burning energy. It is a gas guzzler. And just like we need to breathe oxygen every minute of the day, our cells need this oxygen, and if that's cut off, then we die. So if you fall under the water and you drown, if you're underwater for 5 minutes, you're gonna die. Now, your cells also need fuel 24 hours a day. They're always needing fuel. And the difference between oxygen and the energy fuel that would be in the form of glucose or fatty acids that a cell can use to run the machinery is that we have ways to store energy, and we don't really have a way to store oxygen. So we need to understand that this ability to store fat on our body was more than insurance. It was absolute survival for a brain that's going to be needing to be fed. So our brain actually needs fuel, which is often the form of the breakdown of fat, which creates fuel that the brain can use to eat, or glucose, which is from carbohydrates in the environment. Now, the brain uses these as fuel, and the brain is also made of a lot of fat. There's actually fatty building blocks in the brain. So our brain evolved with a lot of behaviors that encourage us to go and seek high-calorie food in our environment. The right kind of building blocks for our body and our brain, and enough energy to fuel it. Now, nature doesn't create these big energy hogs without a big payoff. So when we got a big brain that requires a lot more energy than a chimpanzee, for example, then we needed to get a trade-off. And that trade-off was an ability to use this brain to plan and to also prepare food in such a way that it is more nourishing. We also use our brain a lot for social reasons to connect to each other. Now, these are all connected to our homeostasis, to our ability to maintain balance in the environment. The most important way that we have of maintaining balance is to start off with the idea that on the planet Earth, there are seasons. And typically, the most abundant food season is followed by a period of scarcity and starvation. So we tend to think of food as being able to something that we can store in a cupboard. There was no ability to do this until very, very recently. There's no electricity, there's no freezers or refrigerators, there's no canning. We figured out a few things like salting food to preserve it and drying it, but those are also fairly recent. The way that we store food is on our body. And if we didn't have the capacity to overeat, starting with our brain allowing us to have eyes that are bigger than our stomach, which means to eat past the time when we might feel full, and to be motivated to do so, then our stomach, which can expand gigantically. It can shrink from really small to really large, so we're able to gorge if there's food available at one time. And then our body will digest this food and it will store it as fat on our body. And human beings have 10 times the expected number of fat cells for an animal of their size, of a mammal of their size. And that is because we have this huge brain, and our fat storage is insurance for that brain, because when there's no food available in the environment, our brain still has to eat. And so you can think of it as like, it is very much like oxygen. So if you want to go under the ocean and go scuba diving where you're not going to be able to breathe, you need to bring a tank with you. And our fat stores are that tank. Well, now we live in a time that really hasn't occurred on Earth before, where food, or at least food-like substances, are really, really abundant. We can eat our fill any time that we want. And also, food doesn't require much preparation. So our days aren't devoted towards seeking and preparing and eating food the way that it always has been throughout human history. So we are in a period of adaptation right now, and our bodies are attempting to adapt, but we need to take a step back and try and understand that we have put forth changes in the environment that are creating unhealthy changes in our body. And when we have a lack of homeostasis, we have a lack of wellness. So homeostasis is this balance that we have with the outside world. But right now, the problem we're having with our homeostasis is that the outside world is no longer predictable. And that makes our hormones go all awry. And also, it's going to make things a little bit different from individual to individual, because the environment was fairly stable before, but it isn't any longer. So we're seeing a lot of general trends, but we're also seeing a lot of individual trends. It's really, really important to human survival to be able to store fat. And our environment right now is cueing us to be in fat storage or fat accumulation mode. And what people are doing to deal with that is to try and lose weight, which is a very poor strategy, because it doesn't address how our body is in balance with our environment. It's attempting to starve in the face of abundance. That doesn't make sense to our physiology. And what happens is, obviously there is a very simple component of calories in, calories out, but when the body is thinking that there's starvation coming or when there's food available, it needs to make sense out of these mechanisms. And a lot of times what it does is it just will start to down-regulate your metabolism. You'll have less energy, you'll be hungry all the time, you'll be highly motivated, and you'll need to use all your willpower and strategies. All the energy you have available to do things that you really like and care about are going to be sequestered. They're going to be rounded up and applied only towards restricting your food, because that's such a hard thing to do, because it's out of balance with your physiology. So when we understand how our homeostasis works, when we understand how our weight regulating mechanism keeps our body weight stable over the course of a whole lifetime, we can make some small changes in our environment. The ones that are causing the biggest problems with us, we can change those, and then that'll reactivate, reboot our weight regulating mechanism, and we will be back in homeostasis in a normal range and in a normal place. So that's the joy of homeostasis, and it means no food preoccupation and a stable, healthy, attractive weight for a lifetime.